Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 16th General K.S. Thimayya Memorial Lecture. Please stand for the school song. Romil, school song, please. On, Cottonians on, muster on the side of right, march warriors to the fight. The foe and strike with might, neck dextroso, maxim stroso. Thank you. Please be seated. Today's lecture is our 16th, and we would not be here if not for your constant and unwavering support. Given the pandemic, the decision to go ahead with this year's lecture was not easy. And the easy option, perhaps, was to cancel it or postpone it. But how could we? We pay tribute through these lectures to General K.S. Thimayya, India's third and longest-serving Chief of Army Staff and a great son of Cottons. After Cottons, he enrolled at the Royal Indian Military College, Dehradun. He was later one of 6 Indians to be chosen to attend the Royal Military Academy at Sandhurst in 1926. General Thimayya was commissioned into the British Indian Army and went on to become the first Indian to command an infantry brigade that formed part of post-World War II British Commonwealth Occupation Force in Japan. He received the British Distinguished Service Order for his service to the British military during World War II. Service came to General Thimayya and his family easily. His brothers, too, were members of the armed forces. His wife, Nina, was awarded the Kaisar-e-Hind for her public work in Quetta. In the late 1940s, General Thimayya was chosen to lead the counter-offensive in Kashmir and headed the Jammu Kashmir force, playing an instrumental role in the consolidation of Ladakh with the capture of Zojila Dras and Kargil. He went on to become the Chief of Army Staff from 1957 to 1961. After his retirement, the UN requested his services in 1964 to command the troops operating in Cyprus. General Thimayya was a compassionate, tenacious soldier who led from the front. His never-say-die attitude, particularly against adversity at our borders, made him an exemplary person and soldier throughout his career. It is in his memory that we hold these lectures. How then could we not hold this year's edition? We are thrilled to have with us the principal of Bishop Cotton Boys School, Professor Dr. Edwin Christopher. He was appointed earlier this year and has been a great friend to the trust every single time that we have called upon him. His support, in fact, has made this lovely venue you have here before you today possible. Thank you, sir, and we look forward to working with you more closely in the future. Some of you may have noticed that the trust this year has undergone some changes. Our second longest serving trustee, C.N. Kumar, or CN as he is fondly known, has moved to a supervisory role as the executive patron of the trust. Our former managing trustee and perhaps the face of KST, Aditya Sondhi, has passed on the baton selflessly to our new managing trustee, Romil Turakhia. We are, of course, delighted to have with us in person today both C.N. Kumar and Aditya Sondhi, some of our former trustees here as well. I see some of our friends from the Old Cottonians Association here. We have with us former speakers, Old Cottonians, teachers, dear friends from the armed forces, friends of the trust, and young students. We are also aware that some of you may be attending your first lecture today, and we trust that you will be enriched by the experience. On behalf of the trustees, I welcome you all. May I please invite the principal of Bishop Cotton Boys School, Professor Dr. Edwin Christopher, to kindly say a few words.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome you all as Old Cottonians to the august institution existing last 154 years. We saw the outreach banner which says K.S. Thimayya's lecture, and 16th edition of it. It's an endeavor. Life is a journey, and every journey has its endeavorment. And endeavor means something committed that we need to take upon. We find a lot of activities in our life that has been crippled due to pandemic today. And we find everything new, everything very conceptual, and things are not according to the strides that we look upon. We always have a lot of complaints in life, and pandemic is one more great complaint that we do today. But have we ever thought this pandemic has taught us few lessons that we need to learn and focus upon so that the life goes on as an endeavor? The first lesson is be with your family and be safe, which we were not doing it all these years. We had neglected a lot of things for ourselves, a lot of things for the family, and we call it as a sacrifice, which definitely is not. And the second aspect of it, we always believe in helping out each other at every given point of time, saying that this is what I have done to you. But unfortunately, we have not realized what is that we have done to our own selves. Today, each of us has a question to ask. What is that we have achieved in the endeavors of life that we have gone through, the number of years we have lived in this world? Have we contributed anything that people can look forward and say, here is a person who has done something in life, not just for himself, but for others to speak? And we have seen how General K.S. Timaya, in his life, dedicated and astonishingly gave his life for the sake of protecting and subduing the military and the forces for which he was recognized vehemently and called by the other European countries to serve their regiment at given point of time in various capacities. And to hold a lecture on his behalf in his name is definitely an endeavor of all of us, because it teaches two things in life: commit and dedicate, for which you need to be selfless. And when you commit and dedicate, and when you're selfless, things will fall in place accordingly to what you need to achieve in life. This is a culmination of not just old Cottonians of 70s batch or 60s batch. As I told you, 154 years of legacy of the school. We also have people just passed out in the last year as Cottonians who have joined here today to listen and understand what life is all about. Today, we have a speaker whom we have already enriched with in the school, in the virtual platform, when we started this mentorship program from entrepreneurs to teach the younger kids today what is career and what is life. So we need to take a leaf out of the speaker's life to understand what is the amount of sacrifice that he would have undergone to reach this place today and to deliver a lecture to people who's across the world viewing this online, and we being seated here in this august institution to listen to what the speaker is going to tell us. Before that, let us clear our mind with all the aspects that we have in form of illusion, which we believe that I have done something. It is provided that you do something for us. Ultimately, what you give to the society gives back to you. The school has given you many things in life, and this is way you give it back to the school is one of the most important conceptual aspect of each Cottonian who lives and breathes what Cotton family does. I hope this evening will not be a waste, but definitely an enriching experience to take it back home that yes, I did something today in life. Not did, but learned, and learned the best part of it in a much better way and the best way as well. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for those thoughtful words. I think it is safe to say that the pandemic has taught all of us to reevaluate our priorities. Now to this evening's lecture. Our speaker today, Bharat Goenka, terms himself a social hermit for whom programming was just a hobby, but for whom resilience comes naturally. He is credited with turning a mishap that could have potentially been a big downturn at the beginning of his entrepreneurial journey into Tally, which has now reached 2 million users globally. A quality perhaps that he no doubt imbibed from his time at Cottons. What else would explain him failing history in the 7th standard but topping it in the 10th? One also hears that Bharat is notorious for not attending classes in his 3rd year of college at National College, Bengaluru. Urban legend has it that he is yet to collect his BSc degree in spite of all of these years. I'm sure that you're going to enjoy hearing from the man himself about him and his, and Tally's rather, inspirational journey. Bharat will first deliver his lecture, following which our managing trustee Romil will be in conversation with him. We will be taking questions. Those of you watching online, please send us your questions in the chat box, and we will try and do our level best to keep you in the conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, the Tally story.
Thank you, Lokesh. And thank you, Professor Christopher. Although you did put a lot of pressure on me to try and make this useful to people. I have to start by stating that I am feeling both inadequate and undeserving to be speaking on this platform. When you see the names of people who have delivered a KST lecture before, and the names of people who are going to deliver a KST lecture in the future, I don't think I should be the one who should be counted among them. So I am feeling especially privileged to be standing here. And thank everyone for giving me this opportunity and giving me this honor. "40 years is a long time. It's been 40 years since one has left school. And to try and compress 40 years of life into 30 or 40 minutes of explaining it will never do justice. So for the last few days, I've been trying to think through what can make it worthwhile to spend 30, 40 minutes on. And I will not pick the most important moments of life, but I will pick few things which were really durable in the entire journey. Right? And many things have shaped it. Of course, for example, just being in school shaped it. And I want to pick up from what Lokesh said, that in the 7th standard, I got 27 out of 100 in history in the 2nd term. And in the same term, I got 100 out of 100 in math. The easiest lesson to take from that, for me, had been that, I'm good at math. History sucks. Yeah. And that was the easiest thing. And that was also the first rebellious thought which came into my mind. That, fine, I'm not good at history. How does it matter? The life-changing moment which happened for me had been confronting the reality that I know how much I knew about math, and was 100 on 100 deserving of what I knew. Sorry. Was 100 on 100 deserving of what I knew? And the reality was no, because I did not know 100% of math. or 100% of even that portion of math for which I got 100. It was just incidental that some of the questions which came were which I knew. And it was incidental that the teacher who marked me was lenient enough to allow me 100. And on the opposite side, I had 27 on 100 on history. And it's not that I didn't know anything about history. I knew reasonably well, but it was incidental that the specific questions which came in the history paper were not something which were areas which I was not completely familiar with. What really started happening with me were two major things which came, which has helped me through in life. The first was to stop accepting someone else's judgment about me. So I stopped becoming thrilled about getting 100 on 100 because that was a judgment my math teacher had about me. I stopped feeling bad about 27 on 100 because that was a judgment my history teacher had about me. It started becoming that, do I know how to judge myself? And if I don't, then there's a problem. And literally from then onwards, I never studied for exams. I studied because I started enjoying learning. The second thing which happened was understanding what got me to perform poorly. So it's apart from the stark contrast of 27 on 100 and 100 on 100, the reality was I knew I had not done well. And I knew my reason for not doing well. And the reason was I used to be good at being able to do things by analysis, and I had a really horrible memory. So my capacity to learn things which cannot be analyzed was very low. And that struck deeply home, that there are various methods of learning, and I just seem to be poor at some of them. And that's not good. So the journey which started was trying to understand how do you become skilled at the various methods of learning. Rote is also a method of learning. It helps you sharpen your memory, and it's very important. Yeah? Analysis is a method of learning. Inference is a method of learning. There are some 7, 8 fundamental methods of learning which, if you become skilled at, you can learn anything you want in life, forever in life, because life is a journey of learning. So those foundations were laid in the school. And it was just because Lokesh brought it up, it was something which I wanted to share with you all. But the two important things which I really wanted to share, and which will connect back to what you will call the tally story. And I must restate why I feel inadequate and undeserving. I am the face of Tally. As in the country, I am known because of Tally. Tally, as a company, has been there for 34 years. The first 16 years, it was run by my father, and I used to be the programmer. Then after my father passed away, I ran the company for almost a decade. And since then, the company is being run by my son and my daughter who's sitting here. The company did achieve some brilliant things in the first 16 years. I almost drove the company into bankruptcy during the time that I was managing it, to the point that my wife Sheila, she extracted us out of the bankruptcy. And then from the time that the children have been running it, it's been doing brilliantly well. Right, so it is just incidental that I get credited for Tally as a company. But yet, the reality is I have been an integral part of it, so I can share its journey rather than claim to be responsible for its journey. So a few things about the company Tally, really. It's a company which is known as a software product company. At its heart, actually, it is what we call a technology company because we, we, we do a lot of low-level systems programming, which are traditionally not done in what you will call software product companies. And the product is an incidental outcome of this work that we do. But even deeper behind it, it's a company which is built on philosophies, on some values and principles and philosophies which existed before the company came into existence and has survived for these 34 years, and we continue to build on them, which is what I would be wanting to really share. In fact, we used to take and continue to take frequent lectures inside our own company on the philosophies. In one of those lectures, a senior gentleman got up and said, you know, all this philosophy is very nice, but that's a luxury you can afford when you don't have to worry about sending your children to school and paying for their fees and feeding your family. Right? So it's nice to hear about the philosophy. I wanted to put some things in context, so I will give a preamble statement. And the purpose of the preamble is not to state some glory. The purpose of the preamble is to state that when you think in terms of philosophy and values, there are no boundaries. So another small thing which Lokesh mentioned was that in the third year of BSc, I hardly attended college. And yes, I did attend 4 days of college. And I was almost denied sitting for the exam. And I literally just managed to get a passing grade. And the reason for that was that I had already joined my father in business. We used to have a small factory. It was a wood-based factory. And as a normal small-scale industry of those days, and even today, we were what you would call a sick industry. We were deeply in debt. As a family, so as a business, we owed money to the banks and others. And as a family, we owed money to literally every person that we knew, literally. I mean, the only reason that we would know someone is because we owed money to that person. There was no other reason for even having a relationship with that guy. But the great thing was that despite having nothing to be optimistic about, we were an amazingly optimistic family. We always believed that the turn is just going to happen, that the turnaround is just going to happen. And in those days, at some point, I started getting into programming. We got a couple of jobs. I got my first paying job from Canara Bank for doing some interest calculation work for them. We delivered it to them. They asked us to send them a bill. We sent them a bill of 5,000 rupees. And the manager called my father and said, you have sent a bill of 5,000. That is, you can't do that. You have to send me a bill of at least 50,000. And for us, even changing the bill from 5,000 to 6,000 would have meant a lot. And the reason why it would have meant a lot is because in those days, we were not even paying salaries. We were not having enough money to pay salaries to our people. And the response which my father gave was that, but it is not worth 50,000. I can't raise a bill of 50,000 on you. Because he has only put in 8 days of effort. There's no way that I can charge you give you a bill of 50,000. A similar episode happened almost 4 months later. We got another job from Vaisya Bank. And they were getting into share trading and they wanted us to do something for them. And we wanted to do something really different for them. I just say, ki hatke karna hai. And one spent, I think, over a period of 2 months, I must have spent at least 30 nights in Vaisya Bank's office sometimes sleeping on their meeting room tables. At the end of 2 months, we had not been able to deliver. And when we started the contract, we had taken an advance from them for about 30,000. At the end of 2 months, they were in a hurry. We couldn't complete the job. And the GM who was in charge at that time and the DGM who was in charge at that time, they both felt so bad about canceling the contract because they had seen the amount of effort that has gone into it. But they felt even worse when the next day morning, I went there to hand over the check back to them, for which we had to borrow money to give it to them. And they said, but this is not something that you need to give us back. We have only cancelled the contract. So we are not going to pay you the rest of the money, but the advance is yours to keep because you have put in the effort. But there was a basic underlying philosophy that had driven the family and continues to drive it till today. Business is not about money. Business is about exchanging what father would use to call energies with each other. So his line always used to be that if what I have done for you has not been good for you or not been useful for you, then what you have given me cannot be good for me or useful to me. So I can't keep your money. Your money will do something bad for me. Because I gave you something and you gave me money. And what I gave you didn't work for you. Your money can't work for me. And what I need is money which will work for me. Okay? These philosophies have lived with us for these decades. I was sharing with Romil when I was speaking to him that in our journey of Tally, by the grace of the Almighty, we achieved some successes. We've got a very strong and loyal user base. And many, many times in this journey, it has happened that some event would have taken place in the country. For example, when the tax regime changed to VAT, and then the tax regime changed again to GST. And very recently, when it changed to GST, at that time, we had approximately 1 million users. And not a single customer would have grudged paying 2,000 or 3,000 rupees to us for giving them a GST-ready Tally. Essentially, it was time to reap the benefits of your customer base. We would have picked up 200, 300 crores from the market literally overnight. But this fundamental philosophy has been that people should never need to pay you because they have to pay you. They should need to pay you because they want to pay you. They would have had no option if we had said that GST-ready Tally is 3,000 rupees more. They would have had no option. That's not the right way to get money from your customer. The right way to get money from your customer is when they do have an option of not paying you and buying something else. Then they are your customer. Else they are your prisoner. How this has helped really over these years is we have seen that people are happy to watch Tally grow. My customers are happy to watch us grow. My business partners are happy to watch us grow. My suppliers are happy to watch us grow. My bankers are happy to watch us grow. The government is happy to watch us grow because another philosophy which my father had was, we should become one of the largest taxpayers of the country. That's what you would call becoming big. So that was another statement which one learned from father. He said that hard work does not make anyone successful. Everyone does hard work. You go to the farms, you go to the railway station and you'll find the coolies doing hard work. Everyone does hard work. Said you grow on what in Hindi we would call the ashirvad of people, that people want you to grow. People think well of you. And the statement that he always made was, ask yourself, why should anyone first even think of you? Second, if they do think of you, why should they think well of you? What have you done? What have you done for them? What have you done for anyone which will make anyone think well of you? So it is fundamentally about building for yourself your reputation as a company, as an individual, where people would want to think well of you. And to paraphrase something that Dr. Christopher said, and yet in a slightly different context, it is a combination of being extremely selfish, yet extremely sacrificial. So when I'm using this term extremely selfish, it was not about not returning the money to Vaisya Bank because we could not afford it. Right? Because we could not afford it. We had to borrow in order to return the money. But the question to ask was, can we afford not to return it? Can we morally afford not to return it? Can we afford not to return it and therefore lose the well wishes of those people? And the reality was that canceling the contract, I said, did hurt them because they saw us working hard, but it was okay. I mean, we were a supplier and we didn't do our work. But after we returned the money, those people were friends with us for years together, and they always wished well for us. Perhaps that wouldn't have happened if we had not returned the money. It would have been just another cancelled contract, big deal. And one can share a large number of such episodes through life, through the journey of Tally and through the journey of my father before that, where you stay firm on this fundamental philosophy that life is about exchanging energies, and are you exchanging the right energy? And if you are, at some point or the other, it will culminate well for you. The other thing I would just like to share, I don't know how I'm doing for time, was on the subject of learning. When you are as bald as I am, you have obviously spent enough years of life learning. But an important aspect of learning, and particularly from an entrepreneurial perspective, had been about how do we learn the wrong things. See, learning is not about learning the right things. Learning is about learning. Right? It's incidental that sometimes we learn the right things and sometimes we learn the wrong things. And again, I was very fortunate in my early days of this learning process of sometimes recognizing when I'm learning the wrong thing. So in the entrepreneurial journey, we all tend to take decisions. It's not just an entrepreneurial journey, in any journey of life, right? We all tend to take decisions. A short while ago, I was talking to Romil's daughter, and she's at the cusp of a decision on what to take for her future upcoming exams and upcoming courses in college, etc. Yeah, so we all face this dilemma of decisions. And we are all taught, that you have to be careful about your decisions because your decisions decide the future. And the reality is it doesn't. The reality is it doesn't. The reality is the future is unknown. And the beauty of life is that the future is unknown. Because if the future was known, life would not be interesting. Hey, it's like going and watching a movie after someone has completely told you the story about it, and particularly going to a mystery movie after someone has told you the story. I mean, what's the fun of going to the movie? Okay? The whole beauty of life is that the future is unknown. And yet, we spend such an enormous amount of time trying to predict it or control it rather than embrace it. And then we learn the wrong lessons. Because occasionally, so you take a decision on any aspect at a given moment in time with a given anticipation. It's not a prediction, it's an anticipation. And sometimes what you anticipated turns out right, sometimes it turns out better than what you anticipated, and sometimes worse than what you anticipated. And whenever it turns out worse, the wrong lesson that you learn is, you know what, I should be more careful in my decisions. I took a hasty decision. I did not study the decision enough. And with passage of time, people just slow down their decision taking. They slow down their risk taking. The worst thing that an entrepreneur can do is reduce that capacity for risk. But that's what happens. That's the wrong lessons that we learn. So we don't learn the lesson that despite whatever you do, the future remains unknown. You don't learn that as the lesson. The lesson you learn is, oh, I did not study enough. Oh, was not careful enough. I should be more circumspect. I should be, you just learn the wrong lessons. And because the future is unknown, we come back to the right lessons is A, the future is unknown. B, you took a decision in a given moment in time and a given circumstance. Now circumstances have changed. Some caused by events in your company, some caused by events outside. Right now we are all sitting in with our masks on with events which are not caused by any one of us. Yet, but we are in that circumstance. And in the new circumstance, you take a new decision, and then the circumstance changes again, and you take yet another decision. You never slow down your capacity to take decisions. It's one of the things which I have tried to imbibe in both the children. And one of the reasons why I think they are doing so brilliantly well in the company is their ability to cope with this reality that decisions just need to be taken. And after that, you just need to work to try and make the decision right. The decision is never right or wrong. The decision is just a decision. It is after the decision is taken, what is the work that you do to make it right? Again, when she's going to college, she'll take a decision to take some courses, right? And there's no such thing as a right course or wrong course. It is now that I've decided to take these 2 courses or 5 courses, what am I going to do to make that right? Okay. And I think that changes. It changes the way your perspective of life. It changes the way you deal with it. And these are the two big things which have really, I thought I would like to share in this long journey of life. And of course, the early part of life in Cottons and how it laid that particular foundation which allowed me to get into this area. Thank you. Thank you so much for having the patience to hear me out. Thank you.
Thank you, Bharat. If you would just stay on for a minute while they just change the stage settings and get the chairs on. Can we get the chairs on, please, and take the podium off? Thank you so much for a riveting lecture. And quite clearly, you don't like bugs in software, just as you don't like them in real life. Limit our questions. We'll give priority to the audience here for the Q&A. And then we've got quite a few questions from the online audience. We'll limit our questions here to about 5. But just before that, just a chat with Bharat. Bharat, so thanks for that. You alluded to quite a few choices that you made, decisions which are
important. Some of the tough choices that I saw or I heard about just now are to remain a product company and not a services company. And and if we go back to circa 85, which is roughly when you started, that's when roughly when Infosys or quite a few of the Infosys, Wipro, quite a few of the services companies started then. And obviously taking 10, it was an arbitrage thing. It costs you $20 for a software engineer per hour and you sell for 70, and it was quite a tempting thing. That's just abroad. But even with your existing customer base, I'm sure you've got requests like, can you create inventory packages for me? Or can you charge me per annum but make those changes for me? What was the thought process in staying steadfast to the product line? And the real question here is, are there some lessons to be learned for the software industry in India in general? Because we're seeing quite a few services companies sprout up, but very few quality product companies come up in India. So any thoughts?
I think we were exceptionally lucky early on to recognize the fundamental difference between a product and a service, and which is even beyond the domain of software per se. That the fundamental characteristic of a product is that with 10 people you can deal with 10,000 customers, but if you are in service, for example, if I'm giving haircuts, 10 people cannot give haircuts to 10,000 people in a day, but 10 people can sell 10,000 bars of soap, for example, right? So we were very clear that we wanted to be in this business of a product, and therefore we used to give services free, so that we don't get tempted to be distracted into the revenue stream of services and lose the capability to scale out products. So I think that was a fundamental insight that we were very lucky to have very early on. And again, I go back to this point that why I feel good about it is that we were doing it when we couldn't afford not to take that money. I mean, the money was available. People used to offer it to us and we have spent days and nights giving services to people completely free. Today, we are a 34-year-old software company. We have got close to 2 million users. I've got some users who have purchased software from us 25 years ago, paid us that one time, never taken an upgrade, and continue to get free service.
Wow, that's quite noteworthy, actually. But then when you choose to become a products company, and I'm sure this question is topmost on quite a few people's minds, how do you battle piracy? So that's the topmost. We all know people who've got a floppy disk of Tally, which was not actually Tally, and so on.
No, it was actually Tally. It was not paid for Tally.
It was not paid for. Different. It was Tally, but it wasn't licensed. So any lessons that you learned along the way about piracy and how you...
Yeah, I think most people don't really resonate with the way we think about that subject, honestly. So first, this point which I made, that someone who had paid me 25 years ago continues to get free service, I should probably extend that point to say that any user of Tally, whether they have paid us or not, they call our service center and they call it toll-free and they get service. So pirated users also get service, free. Oh. Right? And I don't think many people resonate with what we do and why we do. So the first thing which used to happen even in the early days, and this was a statement again made by father, was he would ask this question. I mean, right now, most of the audience here are Indians. And the question to ask each of you is that because you are an Indian, do you feel like a thief? Do you think you are a thief? The answer is no, right? And the problem is that it has been imposed upon us that there seems to be something weak about the Indian moral fiber, which is what causes piracy. And therefore, people who use pirated software are thieves, and that's the whole Western statement of the Western software companies which got imposed on the software industry. And the basic reality is that, yes, first, people are not thieves. And second, the country is an underserved country. It's a little dark, and perhaps today's life is a little different, but still I would like to, if people don't mind, I would just like a small show of hands. If I took out 15,000 rupees from my pocket right now and gave it in your hands and told you that Monday morning by 10:30, please get me a licensed version of Microsoft Word or licensed version of AutoCAD. Will you know where to go and buy it? Do you know where to go and buy it? How many hands can we see? 1, 2,
Yeah, just 3.
3, 4, 5,
4.
right? And this is a modern world. When you don't even know where you will go and buy software, where is the question of saying that you have got legal software? Right? So the problem is not the problem of the user, it's the problem of the supplier. Do we have a convenient enough way for people to buy? If we don't have a convenient enough way for people to buy, I'm happy that at least they're using it. Right? And as we kept making it more and more convenient, our sales kept going up because no one wants not to pay. They just don't know where to pay and whom to pay, honestly.
So a fairly generous view that your company has taken. You're right, it's not in consonance with the rest of the software industry. Just before I get on to the next question, I'd like to request the volunteers to hand out the tokens. If anyone who has questions can just raise their hands, and by show of hands, you'll be given a token by the volunteers, and I'll call out the token number just after we finish this tete-a-tete. So please raise your hands, and the volunteers are watching, and they'll come to you with a token. Thank you. So I heard you mention, Bharat, that you could have charged extra for a GST module, etc. And now we'll just move a little away from Tally itself. And because you're in touch with more than 2 million SME users, small and medium enterprise users, and obviously the virus has not been very good to them, to any of the SME users. We are in a pandemic and there is a downturn of some sort. And that's the first problem. The second is that the GST regime that was brought in, it's quite clear that there have been some missteps along the way, the right direction perhaps, but some missteps. And you're closest to that community. So what's your view on GST, what's going on in the nation, especially in the SME segment, topical because of COVID?
Yeah, so again, I've been very fortunate to be in very close quarters to watch the thought processes as the various tax regimes have emerged in the country. And honestly, yes, GST was, from a thought process perspective, a step in the right direction. See, many people don't understand and don't really go into the depth of the taxation system per se. So the concept of tax itself is that it is an involuntary contribution of one individual. So the important term is that it's an involuntary contribution of an individual for the benefit of the community. Right? So that's what a tax is. The very fact that it is involuntary automatically requires that there be enforcement. See, when something is voluntary, then that's the end of it. But when it's involuntary, there is a need for compliance. This whole concept of compliance comes because it's an involuntary frame. Now, for a variety of reasons, over a period of time, the trust deficit between what you will call the government and the citizen has been continuously increasing. So very recently, 3 or 4 years ago, before Mr. Anant Kumar, the MP, passed away, I was on a podium with him when I had brought up the subject that what can we do? Can we bring the word trust back into our dictionary? So just think about it. All of us who are not in politics, when we are sitting and talking together, we talk about politicians as rascals. And when you take the government, the bureaucracy and the government, they talk about the businessmen as rascals. Right? And we are really from the same fabric, right? It is people from my families, your families who are in the bureaucracy, and there are people in the bureaucrats' families who are in business. But when you are in your group as a businessman, they are rascals, and when they are talking, we are rascals. So what tends to happen is that instead of trying to make the process of compliance simple, the process of compliance is attempted to be made watertight. And that's a downward spiral for 2 or 3 reasons. One downward spiral is that if the cost of compliance or the effort of compliance is harder than evading it, and it seems possible to evade it, you not only save money, you also save the effort. Right? And so therefore it increases evasion. And then it cycles back into making that regime more and more strict, and that cycles back to further evasion. Okay. So that's the logjam that we are in, honestly. Right. And GST was a step to try and unlock that. But unfortunately, for a variety of reasons, both technical as well as the democratic process of decision making, as you could call it, prevented that from coming alive completely. I am still very optimistic and hopeful that in the next couple of years, some steps will make it come alive. And if it does become as simple as it was originally planned to be, it can become an extraordinary economy booster, Right. So to fully go into details will take the rest of the night.
Sure. Understand. And I asked you this question specifically because you were part of the GST Advisory Council.
Not really advisory council. I was just fortunate to be part of part of many conversations when the whole shaping was taking place.
Right. Well, thank you so much. And have we got the volunteers? Have we got the questions and the tokens around? Sure. So do we have mics, or should we get this mic up and... So can we pass this mic around, please, for the questions, and Bharat will directly address those questions.
Yeah, Bharat, I'm Wing Commander Bhatt, Kiran Bhatt, 66 Pope.
Okay.
A great lecture.
Thank you.
And like you, HC, I was there when Reverend Thomas, and I also had these problems with studies, and finally went to the National Defense Academy. Now, my question is, in the Air Force, we used to say man-machine environment. You covered the man, you called the machine, your software. But my main doubt is about the environment. Now, in 1991, we took our gold by ARC aircraft and surrendered it in courtesy Narasimha Rao, and then moved ahead. Yeah. But the control from Bretton Woods of the West or whatever, financial, still exists. Yes. Now, on the one hand, like even my brothers, who was 63 Cottons, has faced this small-scale industry in depth, and through him I learned a lot. It was always a stifling environment. Now, when you look at USA, right, from Benjamin Franklin down, they have created an environment like that. And now what they're talking about latest is that, okay, we'll follow the third way book of Tengadi in terms of economic policy and move ahead. I would like you to comment on, say, the environment that was here in India, and if you went abroad, the changes and the benefits, the pluses and the minuses. Thank you.
I may not be fully qualified to give a proper answer, honestly. Yet, I will give some perspective which I have had. You see, in India, we have grown. We have grown with a mindset which we call the savings mindset. It's not really just a savings mindset. So in the Mahabharata, there is a line where Yakshiraj asks Yudhishthir that Dukhi kaun hai? Who's the unhappy man? And the answer is कि जो ऋणी है, the person who owes money, that being in debt is considered anathema. And in contrast, if you see the capitalistic frame of the West, being in debt was never an anathema. So it allows you to think in particular ways. It allows you to look at money in a particular way and access it in a particular way and deal with it in a particular way. And when you are brought up in a culture where being in debt is considered very, very negative, and acknowledging being in debt is considered very negative, the way you think about life itself and the way you think about taking decisions is very different. So now, with the world flattening out and the cultures exchanging, you can see shadows of the way we used to think getting reflected in the West, and shadows of the way the West thinks getting reflected in the new generations of the country. So how the amalgamation will pan out, I don't want to honestly make a prediction, but I just wanted to give a perspective about what I feel has been the root cause of this phenomena that we have all gone through in our generation. I don't know if it resonates with you.
No, I think that's wonderful, Bharat. You have hit the nail on the dot. I think that is a unique thing that we have to think about. Because there it's a credit card philosophy, like my brother in USA once said, that even if you don't have, if your mortgage, etc., the fellow will come to you and give you a credit card. So thank you so much. It's wonderful.
Thank you. Token number 2, please. Could we have the mic passed on?
Good evening, sir. I'm Krishna Ol Katonian, 83 batch, Pakenham Walsh. It's a very inspiring story to hear from you. So I have got a couple of questions. First is, being a very old software company, there must have been a lot of temptations to being acquired by someone bigger or for you to expand. And also, your perspective of, the world, the globalization of the world versus, what is your internal philosophy about this? I would like to hear it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, it's not really temptation of getting acquired. Have we been sought for acquisition? We have been sought for acquisition from very, very early on. In the very early days, Tata's had come out with a competing product called EX, and then their director had called us to say if they can buy us out. And we have had conversations multiple times with various people. So it's not about not being tempted, but it has always been about that we are a potentially juicy target to acquire because we are a profitable product company and therefore it's a good acquisition target. Yet people don't believe in the same future that we are working for. So the reason why they want to talk to us is because of the kind of future we paint. But when it comes to valuing you as a company, then it is always that future is not possible. And from our perspective, look, if the future is not possible in your eyes, and it is possible in my eyes, then let me do it on my own. Right? So that's really no great mystery about it. It's just that we've never aligned to the same future or the same confidence about the future with any of the desiring investors. And so we will perpetually continue to have talks because talking doesn't cost anything, right? It's fair. From a globalization perspective, so we have had some good attempts abroad. We have had some really disastrous attempts abroad. And we continue to believe that in the next several years, we will be one of the most dominant players in the world. That's what keeps us going to the office every morning, at least for both the children, at least that's what they are doing. I've gone back into my shell, into my programming zone. But that's why I get up and program every morning, because that's what we want to do. So we actually have never, ever really limited ourselves to what you would call the administrative boundary called a country. because these are artificial boundaries, right? It's one world, it's one humanity, it's one community, and we create these various boundaries for us to deal with this mass. So we never, throughout, we have never really isolated ourselves in terms of these boundaries, but it is just about being able to scale, and you have some administrative limitations, and how much can you scale, and we are in the process of trying to do it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Question here, please. Token number 3.
So I'm Manav Nagaraj, IIC 94.
Great.
So my question is, what and how are you able to pass on the philosophies that you so steadfastly stand for down to the rest of the employees within the organization? Because the motivation for you to turn down the 200-300 crore that you could have got during the GST may not be the same for good talent to just walk across the door to the next product company for 2,000 or 3,000 rupees more a month.
Yeah.
So, and every organization is as good as the last person in the organization.
Very
so
true.
how are you able to, pass on and imbibe your values and your philosophy to every last person within the organization? Thank you.
Yeah, I wish one could claim credit for it. I must give credit to the fact that people have been wanting to do it. See, generally what tends to happen, I find that we all want to do it. It is just that we get trained not to do it. It is very rare that people don't want to do it. But we just get socially trained not to do it. We are told, that you are in a business. In a business, these things don't work. Or you have to look out for yourself, and you get socially trained to think in those terms. So when you are given an environment where you are encouraged to do it, and you had always wanted to do it, you just go ahead and do it. I'll take one example from a company that there was one salesman who had got an order from a government agency for under the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan SSA program, and they had sold 550 copies of Tally for the school education, and the entire order was worth about 2 crores, and it had come in the first week of March, which was for us the year ending, and therefore it was a very large order for us. And a day later, he discovered that the school actually had they had 50 schools, and they were intending to have 10 students per school. And they wrongly thought that they require 550 copies of Tally when they actually required only 50 copies of Tally. It took him 1 week to get that order changed and drop it down to 50 copies. Because the secretary told, look, it's the end of the year, my budget has to close, I've already released the order, I've already done this. And it was not something that I had to tell that person to do. It was not something that someone else in the company had to tell him to do. He was very clear that this buyer requires only 50 copies. They have wrongly placed an order of 550. And he got it cancelled. And he converted it into 50. And you feel proud of those moments that he lost his commission, right? Because he's working on, he's a salesperson. But that's what he did. So people just want to do it.
Thank you. We do have quite a few questions coming in online as well. I'll just take a couple, and then we'll go back to the audience here. There's an interesting question here which says, most people's professional journeys are marked by a few defining moments. What would you say were the 2 or 3 defining moments for you and Tally?
Oh, I wish there were 2 or 3 defining moments. I think there are defining moments almost every month. Very honestly, very, very difficult to come up with. So there are, I will take 2 defining moments at least then. One is, of course, the most talked about moment in Tally itself, when the first demonstration of Tally was given to my father. And which led to the creation of the codeless accounting system, because when I was giving him the demo and I entered on the screen T001, and he asked me the question, what is T001? And I said, it stands for traveling expenses. I said, well, enter traveling expenses. He said, no, computers don't understand English. And he stopped me, saying that I don't understand you. You told me that computers don't understand anything. So where's the question of English or non-English? My response to him had been that it is easier to write a program which understands codes than to write a program which understands English. And that one defining moment was his statement that, are you writing programs to make life of the programmer easier or life of the user easier? I think that philosophy has stayed with us for years together. The second one I would say is that when we barely had 2,000, 3,000 customers, perhaps even less, he made a statement which we laughed about for years together later. He said that there are only two types of businesses: those who use Tally and those who will use Tally.
Amazing.
And we laughed about it for years, saying that, why did you say those words? Why did you not say that there are only two types of businesses: those who have bought Tally and those who will buy Tally? Because the use part we had covered. More than 95% of the country was using Tally. A fraction of them had paid us. So, but we are still on the journey. We are still on the journey. We are still looking at the world as just two types of businesses.
That actually covers the second question, which there was a follow-on question, and I think you've covered that. So, token number 5 from the audience, please.
I have 4.
Token number 4, sorry. Yes, please.
Thank you so much for, I didn't quite know what to
sorry.
expect when I came. So this has been a really lovely evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The question I have is, sure, my name is Aarti Munkur. I'm a lawyer. Could you tell us what sort of corporate social responsibility endeavors Tally is interested in, and how that ties in with the philosophy of the company?
Is it the right person to talk about it? Are them? They are spearheading everything. Can you please?
Yeah, I can.
Hi, I'm Nupur, Bharat's daughter. So I guess to just answer the question a little bit, a summary would be, we've not called it corporate social responsibility for a very long time, considering the legal aspect of it. I think that we have been doing what we can for society, I think in many ways, as far back as I know of before I even joined the company. Including from the education sector to just people that we know of. In the last few years, we have tried to make it a little more structured. So I think right now we realize that there's so much to do that we've tried to narrow it down to 2 or 3 general topics. So last year, we focused a lot on animal welfare. That was my personal passion. We focused a lot on women empowerment, on education. That's from my mom's side. This year, of course, from April onwards, a lot of our efforts have gone majorly into supporting the community because of the pandemic. So we've directed 95% of our funding into the low-income sector, trying to support continuing education, continuing healthcare, continuing everything from jobs, job availability. So that's what we're trying to do, and we'll continue to try and do that. I hope that helps a little bit.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nupur. We have a question from, this is a special one actually. We have a question from Jairaj Daniel, your classmate and former KST trustee. Says, Bharat, I enjoyed your brief talk this evening. My question to you would have been, what in your view and based on your own personal journey is the great moral, ethical, imperative challenge of the day as an individual, a business, and a nation. So he's outlined all three. As an individual is one, a business is second, and a nation is third. Should I repeat that?
Trust him to ask that. So, Jairaj, if you are listening, boy, you owe me one now. So, I'd like to quote a former dean of Kellogg College, Professor Deepak Jain, who incidentally one became fairly close to. And I had asked him this question about how he's seeing the changes of the students. And he made a very interesting point. He said that a few years ago, when you used to talk about students and their aspirations, they were always expressed in terms of what you would call success, and you can say it was codified as material success. And he said that the students of today, they talk about success in terms of significance to the world. That are they doing something which is significant rather than are they doing something which is successful. That I think personally has been for me a very insightful statement which I had been observing around me, but I was never able to put it into the same words that he did. How that connects is that personally, I don't think the world is facing a moral or ethical challenge. I think our generation faced it. See, our generation faced it for a variety of reasons. We were the third generation after independence. And why that is particularly important is that barely 3 generations ago, it was patriotic to be against the nation, against the rulers of the nation. Right? In fact, many of us, of my generation and who will be present here, would have grown up being told that behave yourself, otherwise we'll call the police. The police is supposed to be a friend, right? But we grew up being anti-police. Right? The point I'm making is that because of the environment that you grow up in, your thought processes are shaped in a particular way, and therefore you think about achieving in a particular way. And therefore the moral and ethical dilemmas that you have also are shaped because of that. You know, what you are treating as good and what you are treating as bad. And therefore you still do the bad because you feel that if you don't, you will be deprived. You know, so that's the dilemma that you get into. But the newer generation is definitely far more morally aligned than we used to be, far more ethically aligned than we used to be. Right? So personally, I don't think people are facing a dilemma in the individual space. In the business space, I will make a statement that people need to recalibrate their compass. See, it's a very short life, and I'm not saying that because I'm 60. Right? See, when you look ahead, if you look forward for the next 1 year, if someone tells you that COVID will last another 1 year or even another 6 months, it seems such a long time. My God, how will we survive for another 6 months? But the last 6 months have gone away in a jiffy. The last 20 years have gone away in a jiffy. So life is very short. So in that short life, are you going to enjoy yourself, or are you going to remain bitter? See, when you are not morally aligned, when you are not ethically aligned, it is not that you cause bitterness outside. You cause bitterness inside you because you are perpetually fighting with yourself. And then in this short life, what have you achieved? Okay. So business dilemmas, I believe, continues to exist, and they are very easily overcome. I would like to say that Tally is one of the examples of saying that, see, when I almost drove the company to bankruptcy, people could make a statement that the reason why the company is almost close to bankruptcy is because you did these foolish policies. Now, these foolish policies were that even when we were bleeding, we were giving raise to our employees, saying that, look, my employees cannot suffer. The cost of living is going up. I can't tell them that I'm not going to give you a raise because the company is having a loss. Yeah, so people could give you all that nonsense, honestly. Yeah. But at the end of it, everything is worth it.
Well, thank you so much. We have time just for 2 questions. We'll have to cut off the audience here at token number 5. Sorry, token number 6 onwards. And then there's 1 question online. We'll have time just for 2 questions. Token number 5, please.
Sorry if I'm taking too long to answer questions.
No, please. Everyone, they're here to listen to you.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Simon Vargas. I'm the principal from the National School of Journalism. Thank you so much, sir. I really enjoyed the evening. Thank you so much for being so frank about your life. I've rarely heard someone who's so forthcoming and really acknowledging the mistakes that you made. I just want to know, many times what happens is, as a society, as individuals, we always resist change. And especially spoke about compliance and GST, and we had all those difficulties. Could you just tell us what is your philosophy in your company? How do you take your team along when you want to make a change, and how do you sort of bring a consensus? Thank you.
Yeah, I think what really helps, honestly, is when you are able to share the rationale of the way you think, right? And therefore what you want to do. So and of course sometimes some people do get irritated that you want them to do something and you are giving them almost a 2-hour explanation about why that something needs to be done, and they are saying, just tell us to do it and we'll do it. But I normally find that if you are able to connect things down to fundamentals. I took an example of saying that why we behave in a particular way is because of the fundamental belief that we have is if I do good for you, whatever you do will be good for me. Now, if I can connect any decision to one of these philosophies, then it stops becoming a question as to why should we do it or why should we not do it. However, if you word it slightly differently, so let me take an example. I can ask you to say, tell me how to save tax. And you will come up with a set of options for me. But if I put this statement to you, tell me that I don't want to avoid a tax. I want to pay the right tax. But tell me, what is the right tax to pay, which is lower than another option? You will think in a different way. See, saving tax makes you think in one particular way. Optimizing tax makes you think in a particular way. So it first starts with what is the core philosophy against which you want to make the statement. And the statement is that if I cheat the government of 1 lakh rupees, it's a small percentage, right? It's a small percentage, but it's a large percentage, small percentage for the government, but large percentage for me. So you can say that I have cheated the government of 5% of what I could, of my income. And in return, if the government cheats me of 5% of their income, I'm gone. So I would prefer never to allow that thing to come alive. I don't know if I'm helping answer, but I keep saying that we are a philosophy-driven company, so we tend to connect everything down to fundamentals of philosophy.
Thank you so much. In fact, the next question, and that's the last one, sorry, we're getting a lot of questions online as well. But this is the last one. It's from Shruti Puria, Bishop Cotton Girls' School, ISC 2006. In today's, and it's tied to the previous bit, but more about what Tally is doing for that. So in today's regulatory environment, where there is so much emphasis on corporate governance and financial controls. Is Tally taking steps to update its software to bring in checks and controls for financial reporting?
I think this has been one of the most controversial subjects as far as the company is concerned. See, we are not the nation's moral keeper.
Yes.
We are a developer of a tool. We maintain our own morals, our own ethics. We create the best possible software which another businessman can use. And yes, another businessman can misuse. Okay? I mean, if any of us go to buy a knife for our kitchen, you will go and search for the sharpest knife because you want your work to be easy. You don't want to struggle to cut the tomatoes and the... But if you buy a sharp knife, you can kill someone with it. Okay? So you can go and ask the knife maker that why do you make such sharp knives? So are we bringing in greater financial control into our software so that people cannot do any hanky-panky? The answer is no. Does the software have sufficiency of capability that if a business wants to create controls, can they do it? The answer is yes. Right? So it's a very controversial subject, but we are very clear that we are never anyone's moral keepers.
Very well said. So you provide the tools for people to be compliant, but then the rest of it is left to their conscience, their choice, which is correct. That's all that we can do. Yeah. Thank you so much, Bharat. I'd just like to request C.N. Kumar, our executive patron, who's been, of course, a pillar for us at the Trust, one of the founding members of the Trust, to please come up and present Bharat with a token of our appreciation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It was a very, very enlightening lecture. I thought it came from your heart. And it's really touched a lot of us here. And I think you're also grounded a lot in more the Indian philosophy way of doing business rather than a very Western way of doing business. Congratulations on where you've come. I wish you and your family very well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I now call upon Timothy Franklin.
Good evening, everyone. It is a tradition at these lectures to award the General K.S. Thimayya Medal to Cottonians who have demonstrated exemplary public service. The medal honors the memory of the General, who, apart from his military heroics, was a compassionate leader in civil society. He was awarded the Padma Bhushan in 1954, not for his exploits on the battlefield, but for civil service in Korea as chairman of the Neutral Nations Repatriation Commission, or the NNRC. The NNRC was responsible for repatriating the many thousands of Korean and Chinese prisoners at the end of the Korean War in 1953. This year, we are in the midst of a global pandemic. While India has been spared the devastation seen in some parts of the world, the despair, suffering, fear, and death brought about by COVID is real to many of us present here. The pain of watching loved ones suffer alone in isolation, the anguish of being unable to grieve and celebrate the life of a soul departed, particularly in the stigma-laden early days of the pandemic, are all too real. A group of gentlemen choose to put their lives on hold, while at the same time putting their lives on the line. They chose to take patients to hospital at a time when family members were unable to or sometimes chose not to. They chose to be sons and brothers and performed final rites at crematoriums and burial grounds at a time when flesh and blood were unable to or chose not to. They chose to isolate themselves from their own families. They chose to show love and compassion to strangers. They chose to transport a diseased person to their final resting place across state lines 600 kilometers away at 3 a.m. while afflicted with COVID themselves. They chose to be brave. They chose to show compassion. The General K.S. Thimmayya Medals for Courageous Community Service in 2020 are awarded to 3 angels of mercy, 3 warriors, 3 Cottonians, Tanveer Ahmed, Arham Fahim, and Mohammad Faraz. While you remain standing, can you just turn around? I don't think you know this, but you've received a standing ovation. R.J. Palacio said everybody in the world, there should be a rule that everybody in the world receives a standing ovation at least once. Nobody deserves it more than these 3 gentlemen here. Thank you. Please be seated. I would like to call up to the stage Manav Nagaraj and Tanveer Ahmed and Manav to do the honors.
I think this is one of the best occasions when I've had to speak, and there have been several. I've known Tanveer for 40 years. He's a classmate of mine. He was a neighbor of mine. We grew up in the same locality. We walked every day to Bishop Cotton's. And on the days when it used to rain, we used to share an auto. And even from when we were in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th standard, he used to live and epitomize the school, parts of the school song, which was "Muster on the side of right and march like warriors to the fight," which is what he's done now. I think the principal earlier this evening spoke about dedication and selflessness. And Mr. Goenka told us that, it's not just whether people will remember you, but what they'll remember you for. And I think those 2 things epitomize what Tanveer, Arham, and their colleagues have done during the last 6 months. And I couldn't be happier and more delighted than to present this medal on behalf of the trustees to my friend and my hero, Tanveer.
Thank you, Manav. I'm lost for words. This whole pandemic was an adversity, and in this adversity, we found an opportunity. And I thank the K.S. Thimmayya Memorial Trust for having honored me with this, and the others as well. This probably must be my 13th KST lecture which I'm attending. I would always be seated amongst the galleries and never ever expected that I would be on the stage. So this just happened. I'm not an eloquent speaker like Manav, but this 6-7 months has transformed me big time. We've been able to deliver with the migrants, be it with the train stations, wherever. It was just a call and we could. And I'm thankful to God Almighty for having given me this opportunity. And I thank my parents, my late parents, both of them are no more. Myself and my brother as well, who didn't go to Cotton's, but has been doing stupendous work. People call him throughout the night. He blocks them on the 108, coordinates with the BBMP, sees that they get their beds. So this has just been an opportunity and it's been fantastic. Thank you.
I would like to call up on stage our executive patron, C.N. Kumar, to honor Mohammad Faraz with the medal.
Good evening, everybody. Enough has been said about the pandemic and the kind of situation it has created and the kind of panic it has created amongst all of us. And Manav has spoken about it in terms of the extraordinary services these people have rendered. My reaction initially when I saw an article in the newspaper about Tanveer and his, I didn't know the others were Cottonians really. I knew that you were a Cottonian, but I didn't know others were. Was that should anything happen to me or people whom I know, I felt very comfortable that I could reach out to another Cottonian and say, Tanveer, can you help me? And I'm sure that thought struck a lot of us. So I'm really indeed very honored, but at the same time very humbled at the greatness of your achievement in this particular situation. I mean, it's immeasurable in terms of money, it's immeasurable in terms of effort, and it's immeasurable in terms of dedication to others. As the principal said, what can you do to help make a difference in others' lives? And I think that's what you've done. So I'm very humbled that I'm standing before you guys, and that I have the privilege, real privilege of investing you with this medal. Thank you very much for your dedication. Mohammad Faraz, it gives me great honor and privilege to invest you with this medal in token of your recognition, token of the recognition for the tremendous public service that you've done. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, CN, for that emotional words that you spoke. And I'm going to, before I call on the final medalist, that last line I read in the prelude to this about somebody who was in bed with COVID and helping to transport a body across state line 600 kilometers so they could have an honorable burial was my own aunt. And Arham was the one who did that. Arham, I'm personally indebted to you. Please come up, and I invite our former managing trustee, Aditya Sondi, to please come up on stage and do the honors. Not so soon, Adit, please come back on stage. Adit, on behalf of the trustees, I thank you and we thank you for founding the General K.S. Thimayya Memorial Lectures and building the K.S. Thimayya Memorial Trust into an institution over these last 15 years. The richness of these lectures and the benevolence of the trust are worthy legacies of a truly remarkable human being, a truly remarkable Cottonian, and a dear friend to all of us. Dr. Aditya Sondi, thank you very much.
Thank you, Timothy. I'm so deeply moved by the work that my friends do. So pardon me for being emotional, but today has really been a lesson in humility. For me personally, as a founder of the Timaya Lectures, I just feel like I've handed over a 16-year-old daughter to some friends, and she could not be in safer hands. So firstly, Romel, Lokesh, Tim, Karan, thank you for keeping the flag flying. Bharat for his magnificently self-effacing lecture. I mean, I've always known Bharat to be a spiritual businessman. I don't know how many you find who can fit that description, but he's before you and he embodies everything that's good and right about Cottons and about being human and being humane. And he's once again reminded us about how deep core philosophies can stand us in good stead. After all, that's why we went to Cottons. And of course, my three friends who I know, Tanvir, we go back donkey's years, we worked together on these lectures. CN, I think, already said that it was so uplifting for us to see one of us doing what all of us should have been doing. Many of us fell short on that score. We were more about self-conservation. We thought of ourselves and our families and friends, but you guys went out there, and what more fitting recognition than to receive the medal in the memory of General Timaya. You've just kept that chain. I mean, Timaya went to Cottons in 1918, and 100 years later, I see 3 Timayas here with us. Thank you very much.
We'll give you a mic.
With the permission of the committee, Wing Commander Bhatt, I would like to honor with all the soldiers out here, the 3 people for displaying soldierly courage. So could you please come on the stage, 3 of you? No, I don't need to. Kindly come on the stage, 3 of you. If there are any soldiers out there, please come and join me in giving them a magnificent salute. That's the only thing we can give them. Please come. Any soldiers, any armed forces people, please come forward. At the count of 3. At the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. We salute you. Your courage. Thank you.
Thank you, Timothy, Dr. Aditya Sondi, and thank you, Kojak. Of course, thank you, gentlemen. I think we're all a bit emotional now. The past few months have been difficult for us all, and I'm sure that all of us have experienced loss in some way. We acknowledge the memory of several Cottonians and friends of the Trust who have passed on in this period, including Mrs. Mary Sigamani, kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Kantraj, French teacher, and Mr. Vasco, pantry staff. Please stand in loving remembrance of all those that we have lost, all friends, family members, and acquaintances. Thank you. Please be seated. It has always been the objective of the Trust to give back meaningfully to the school. Our speakers over the past 16 years have included soldiers, scientists, teachers, journalists, doctors, environmentalists, members of the civil services, to name but a few. Like Timothy said, our medal winners over the years belong to all walks of life, and the medal is awarded to recognize selfless Cottonians. It is our endeavor through these activities not only to showcase Cottons to the outside world, but more importantly, to motivate and inspire present students of the Grand Old School. One of the more important things that we do for our alma mater is recognizing former members of our teaching, administrative, and support staff with a citation and check for ₹1 lakh from our benevolent fund. The fund comprises of donations made by Cottonians, and we are grateful and thankful to all our donors, big and small. Special mention, of course, is reserved to our biggest donors, Rohan Narayana Murthy and Nandan Nilekani. Our donees over the years have included retired gardeners, carpenters, cooks, ground staff, helpers, bus drivers and conductors that have held the hands of so many young Cottonians and helped us safely along the way. Retired teachers and principals who have kept us on the straight and narrow, something I can assure you is not an easy task. This is our way of giving back to you for all the years that you have invested in looking after generations of Cottonians. The donees for this year are Mrs. Rajeshwari, helper, worked in school between 1990 and 2018. Mr. Divakar from the account section, 1971 to 2008. Late Colonel John Ellis, former principal, Bishop Cotton Boys School. Late Mrs. Mary Sigamani, teacher, 1988 to 2012. Late Mr. Rayapan, helper, 1982 to 1999. Late Mr. Vasco, pantry staff. It gives me immense pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, to say that in the 5 years since we initiated this fund, we have, as on date, handed out ₹49 lakh to deserving staff members. If we were to add the years of service of each of our donees, it would translate to around 1,400 years of collective service to the school. We would not be able to pull off our lectures if not for the constant support of so many of our friends. Special mention to Mr. Sam for the music every year, in and out. Tristan Mark for video production, Mr. Shivana for sound, Mr. Mehul Pramod, Old Cottonian for photography, Ms. Mamta for catering, Samant for LED stage and lights, Ms. Nitya for secretarial services, and students from the Student Council of the Boys' School. We, of course, thank the principal for his support and look forward, sir, to engaging with you more in the days to come. Thanks, of course, to our former trustees and speakers, Executive Patron C.N. Kumar, and our patrons, Lieutenant General S.K. Jetli, Admiral Shekhawat, Air Marshal Trevor Osman. The evening would not be complete if I did not offer my deepest of thanks to you, my dear friends. Thank you for always standing by the Trust and everything that we do. Thank you for making our events not just Cottonian events, but a Bangalore event. We would not be able to find the strength or the motivation to do what we do if not for your constant and unwavering support. On behalf of the trustees, Romil Turakia, Lokesh Ahuja, Timothy Franklin, and myself, thank you. May I request that you please stand for the national anthem. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Have a lovely evening.